Hola, welcome to Finextra TV. I'm Hannah Wallace, and I'm kindly joined today by Alexander Robson, Managing Editor for Thomson Reuters Regulatory Intelligence, and we're talking about the State of Regulatory Reform report. Hello, Alexander. It's lovely to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
So, to our wider audience then, can you tell us a bit about the report and what the aim is of it?
Of course. Well, it's now in its 11th edition, and it focuses on all the sorts of things that regulatory professionals ought to be aware of and interested in. So if you're a compliance officer, money laundering reporting officer, you're looking at bribery, financial crime, money laundering, compliance issues, market abuse, supervision, authorization, some general conduct of business issues, and wider issues such as cyber risk, culture, those sorts of issues. So big stuff that compliance officers really need to know, in addition to what is essential for them to know in their day-to-day operations.
Sure, and of course last year we spoke off the back of the report, and you put a lot of emphasis on the importance of culture change. And in this year's report, we're still seeing problems for regulators.
We are. Well, I think probably last year, just a very quick recap, was when we spoke, the Royal Commission in Australia was just about to report, and it uncovered some fairly serious failings. Australia's a long way away, but these issues are, they're felt more widely than just there. And to give an example, Goldman Sachs has yet to settle its difficulties in Malaysia over the bond issuance for the 1MDB sovereign wealth fund. Various people have been punished, but the bank has yet to settle its actions with regulators and law enforcement authorities. That was probably going to happen early this year. They've been negotiating throughout the last year. But I think what's of much more interest than that, for instance, is the case in Australia of Westpac, which failed to comply with the transfer reporting regulations as required by Australian law. And that led to it 23 million transactions not being reported to the authorities. And they weren't reporting transactions which involved some rather nasty, unpleasant stuff. And it is amazing so long after the crisis that these issues are still being looked at. I think probably it just goes to show that big institutions are very difficult to manage, and regulators are looking at how they can do that now.
But why are we still seeing such a problem around improving culture change 12 years on since the financial crisis?
Well, this behaviour has just generally been difficult to fix. I think because these institutions are very big to manage. Such problems of culture are not totally exclusively the problem of financial services. They've been in plenty of other sectors as well. But I think it's establishing a chain of command. You're seeing now regulators establish personal accountability regimes to try to hold people responsible in a more effective way than they have in the past. So it's taken quite a long time, but you've got to bear in mind that the rule-making process after the crisis wasn't immediate. It's been gradual and incremental. There was a lot of change, but now the last 3 or 4 years, you're hoping that the financial institutions have got a chance to see some of this change bed down rather than deal with the huge amount of change they had to deal with very soon after the crisis.
Well, that leads me quite nicely into my next question, and it was a big theme in the report, personal accountability. What sort of emphasis do you think regulators will be putting on this theme in 2020?
A lot. We're definitely going to be looking at the UK. There are a couple of instances where we think the Financial Conduct Authority might take enforcement action against senior managers at well-known household institutions. There was certainly, and we refer to them in the report. And so I think that's something that is something to look out for. Elsewhere, in Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, I've already mentioned, you've seen and particularly in common law jurisdictions, you've seen regulators, supervisors, try to adopt, not dissimilar rules to ones we've adopted here. The whole point, holding people to account. We'll just have to see. It's just been a slow, iterative process, and as I say, it's very possible the UK regulator will take action this year. You have to bear in mind that the senior managers regime, has taken place, incrementally for various different parts of financial services, but now it's all, and so I think we will see action this year, undoubtedly.
Well, I urge people to read the report and learn a bit more. One of the other big topics is AI. What do you think the role of AI in wholesale financial markets compliance in 2020 will be?
Well, moving fast is the first answer. I mean, a lot of banks are using AI to try to to tackle historic and current money laundering problems. So, you would use it to root out as many false positives as you could among suspicious transactions. And if we can get there, then all well and good. There are plenty of challenges with that, not the least of which are some privacy rules. But that's a pretty good example of what banks are using AI for. They're also looking at behavioural science and sort of various AI products related to that to try to help them isolate problems and tackle them that way. There are plenty of players in the market who are looking at this very closely right now.
And another area you touch on is sustainable finance. What do you think the role sustainable finance will have in responsibility and accountability going forward?
Well, it's very interesting. Again, we're seeing a lot of noise about that in the national media. Mark Carney, the outgoing governor of the Bank of England, is due to take a role as an envoy, I believe, to the UN on climate change, and he's made a lot of, given a lot of interesting statements on his exit from the bank to urge banks and financial institutions to address this point. I think some people have been mindful that if it's addressed without enough thought, that we could have another financial crisis by creating, illiquidity in a lot of oil stocks, for instance. So it's going to have to be done in a very measured way. But you're already seeing hedge funds tackle companies on what sort of climate disclosures their boards of directors are issuing and how seriously they're taking their responsibilities. We'll be watching this, a lot this year to see what actual rules may come out of this. And regulators will be paying particular attention to make sure that firms avoid greenwashing. So we'll see. It's going to be a very interesting space.
Interesting developments ahead. Well, Alexander, thank you so much for your insights. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks.